Welcome. This is the Drupal usability for April 1st, 2022. Happy April Fool's Day, everyone. I'm Benji Fisher moderating, and Andre Pedrosa is sharing the screen, and we'll start off the discussion. Also present are Erin McHale, Antonia, Christina Chumias, Kimberly Amaral, Marina, Alfer Schall, Ralph Kohler, and Tiago Maiochi. So we have a fairly large group and a good mix of front and back end developers, site builders, beginners and more experienced Drupalers. So a good group for discussing usability. Go ahead, Andre.
Okay, thank you. So the issue I would like to share here is the issue number 31656754. And it's a simple issue. It happens in the Olivero theme. The main purpose of it is to provide a center alignment option for bigger screens, because the way it is right now, if you have a bigger screen, you can see that the main content is left aligned. But the issue is that the way they solved that, I will apply here the patch so you can see. The issue is that when you apply the patch, everything gets centered. But the way this menu displays is different, because in the default, the display, the menu, like it shifts from side to side, like it slides. But in the way that it is now with the patch applied, it shrinks, and you can notice like the way it deforms the letters. It may be hard to see that way because it's a fast transition, but I have some prints that may help to see the difference here. As you can see, this is in the middle of the transaction and the current behavior, the actual behavior. And this is the new transition where you can see instead of sliding, it gets deformed. And it seems that some maintainers, some developers here have different opinions on which is better and which should be applied. I personally believe that the best option is to keep the sliding instead of this distortion option, not just because it's prettier in my opinion, but that's because that was the default behavior. The only problem with that is that it makes more complex, because with the sliding option, if I get here in the slide header, for example, and revert these changes, you see that it introduces a little bug where you can see it goes off screen when it slides. So this part actually isn't our part about discuss how we can make it work, but my idea here is to decide in group which option is better visually or for the UX. If it's the sliding movement or if it's the distortion movement that shrinks and extends the menu. That's it.
Sorry, I just joined. I had to leave for a moment, and the only thing that I've seen is this last seconds, and I see you are moving everything into the center. Could you repeat why? I know
okay.
probably that's a whole thing, but I'm sorry. It's just that that's a huge change, and I just want to be sure that I give the proper feedback.
Okay, no problem. So the issue here is that this new patch serves to make Olivero centered in wider screens, but the current patch makes this menu shrink instead of slide when you close it. And some people argue that it's better to shrink because it's easier to implement, but some people argue that sliding is better, even though it's more complex to hide this small part here where it goes off screen. It's a bug. So my idea here is to discuss which way is better. Should we keep the sliding transition and ask to the devs to work on a workaround so it doesn't appear here to remove this bug of overflowing? Or should we just accept the new shrinking behavior? And yeah, and that's it. Any questions?
Yeah. So just I see. I was just trying to catch up with the issue backlog. Well, all the issue itself, and it was closed several times by like, okay, why are we changing the design? And I see. I know that I'm diverging from the main question you're asking, which is why, if that's okay, the design change or the menu change. But could you give, if you have, if not, don't worry, if the maintainers are okay with changing the design from left aligned into the middle, because I'm seeing some close as design. The design doesn't work like that, and after that, if you want that, let's add a setting.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's just that I'm a little bit lost, and I haven't followed this Olivero issue. And
okay, from what I read in the comments yesterday, the first impression is that, oh, we don't need to change it, but they let it open for votation, and since appeared more and more developers asking for this option to get Olivero centered, they said, okay, so you can work on this and reopen the issue, so they could try to work on a option to center the Olivero theme, because they said that many sites today use this default, use this layout as centered, mostly for wider screens. And yeah, that's it. So that's why they reopened the issue and people started trying to work.
Thanks for the explanation.
You're welcome. So what do you think? Should we just accept the new shrinking because it's way easier for them to implement? They already have this patch here that works with the shrinking behavior, or should we ask them to keep the slide behavior and try to work around this overflow?
So again, the current behavior is to do the sliding effect. The patch that centers it sort of breaks that. And the question is whether to fix that or to use the, could you show us again the other option? Is that,
yeah,
maybe there's a screenshot or.
Oh yeah, there is a screenshot if you want to see movement. Here it is. Here is in the middle of the movement, the screenshot. Like you can see that it shrinks and.
This is not nice.
Agreed.
Yeah. Some people could argue that because it's too fast to see, it won't make a big difference. But for me, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
That's the current behavior of the patch. It shrinks instead of sliding. But
Is it
people went
possible
for
to?
this. Oh,
Sorry.
sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying that people went for this because it's easier to implement, because the overflow here when the slide, it's like it seems to be harder to implement in the without breaking anything in the CSS JavaScript. So that's
So-
what they
so-
were arguing.
So the end state is the same, and the question is just the transition, whether to use a shrink or a slide.
Yeah, because about being centered, they seem to have agreed, like it's okay to have a center option. They would like to have the center option. You can choose once you enable the patch, you can choose if you want it centered or not here. So the default behavior will continue the same, left aligned, and if someone wants it to be centered, they just choose here. But the problem is that it changes the behavior of the menu here, the way it slides and the way it appear and disappear.
I see why they went with a scale instead of a translate, because of because the element is still visible on the left while the opacity is still transitioning.
Yeah.
But the distortion created by this scale X is well, it's not great. I wonder if it can be canceled out by adding a counter scale to the content of the element that is being scaled. That would require some calculations though to apply the exact counter scale to prevent the distortion.
Yeah, from what Andre has said, I think people are willing to keep working on it, and they can probably find a solution. It's just a question of whether they should go to that effort or whether they should stick with the simpler solution. Is that right, Andre?
Yeah, so the questions, like, they are going to work with this patch for Century, but this menu is causing some disagreements, and I thought that bringing it here would be better, because here we have like multiple opinions at once.
The design just wasn't created with centered
Yeah.
layout in mind.
For me, I personally, I would argue that the shrinking is not just a visual bad effect, but it also it's out of scope, because it changes the previous behavior from the patch, from the Oliveto theme. So I think that weights more in the decision of sliding instead of shrinking. But
yeah, that's a good
yeah.
point. I've been wondering, is this a design question or a usability question? And what you bring up makes it a usability question, that we have this option to center or not, and we want to have consistency between the two. So that sounds to me like a usability reason for maintaining consistency.
Yeah.
Any other opinions? Feel free to put them in the chat if that's easier for you.
I'm just going to add that I agree with several of you when you said that the shrink or the distortion of the elements is not a good design solution. And it's, as you were saying, Benji, it's a design opinion. not a UX thing, but I think we've been doing both here on this weekly call for a long time. So I think it's valid to all this feedback also on the design perspective. And obviously on the UX perspective, what you just said also about consistency makes a lot of sense too. So +1 to all these opinions.
Antonia also says in the chat, +1 on consistency. So Andre, are you satisfied?
Okay. Yeah, I think we already have a consensus.
Yeah, and Kimberly and
Thank you.
Tiago also give +1s in the chat. Great. So Andre, you'll update the issue with a comment
Yeah, sure.
and link
Thank
to
you.
the usability issue.
All right. I think now it's rough times.
Yeah. So what shall we talk about next? I think Ralph, would you like to talk about the listening sessions idea that's been discussed in Slack, or would you like to talk about the issue that that Hedden brought up?
I think to move the issue by Lucas forward might be a good idea. He mentioned on the Slack in the thread that he has just a problem with calling in, and he asked if it would be possible if he could answer questions via Slack during the meeting, because it sounded like he is in a loud environment and it would be too distracting if he is on audio and answering directly. He's online right now, I've checked. If someone could quickly ping him, maybe. And meanwhile, I could share my screen and show the patch. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, share your screen. I dropped the issue into the chat for
thank you.
everyone else, and I will ping Lucas.
Okay. It's basically about the field formatter for managed display. I've created a content type called image test to show what the default settings are. Here is, for example, an image, and what the patch brings in. Sorry, to the issue number. I forgot 1 second. Where is the chat? Issue number is number 31731180. Yeah, and it looks the following. You have here the 1 second. Yeah, the settings summary. There was recently an update. You have basically the original image, and image loading is lazy per default. And if you go to the gear, then the following is being added to the field formatter. It's basically the description and the lazy loading attribute, lazy per default, and the other option available is eager. And you have the select lazy loading attribute for images and learn more underneath as another description. And that's basically it. I've already replied on the issue with 2 brief observations on someone has the audio on at the moment. It's a bit distracting. Thank you. The one thing I consider distracting is the shift horizontally. If you open up that jump is unexpected, and I still consider it problematic. And the other thing I've noted a bit more is you have the following in the text. Image assets are rendered with native browser loading attribute, loading lazy by default. This improves performance by allowing modern browsers to lazy load images without the JavaScript. It's sometimes desirable to override this default to force browsers to download an image as soon as possible using the eager value instead. One detail.
So Ralph, Lucas has joined the meeting and he says in the chat that the horizontal shift is out of scope for this issue, but agrees that it should be fixed.
Okay, thank you. One detail I would maybe alter in the description is to actually write, it is sometimes desirable to override what is such a sometimes situation. So basically it's, I would say, if you know that, for example, you have a hero image and you know for sure it's above the fold, such a use case to describe it explicitly. That way, it would be more clear and apparent for the user reading the description. And one other detail I wonder, because per default it's lazy, but if you go to the link provided, you have lazy loading attributes, and for eager, it's the default state per the spec. So if it would be reasonable to make eager the default and that the user has to deliberately choose lazy instead, or if it is something for maybe a follow-up issue, because there's also in comment number 65 a link to developers from Google, Felix, and one other, I forgot his name, and they analyzed the outcome of implementing lazy loading in WordPress. And at first they also had per default lazy loading for every image, and that wasn't all the time beneficial for the performance. So if that would be a thought for a follow-up issue, maybe. Yeah.
Also not pasted something similar down the issue itself. I just pasted that on the chat in here. Basically, the title says avoid lazy loading images that are in the first visible viewport, which actually makes a lot of sense.
And oops, that's the other link from comment number 65.
Antonia, you've unmuted yourself. Did you want to say something?
Well, I think it's clear that the default refers to the default in Drupal and not the default in the spec. And I do agree that above default images obviously don't need to be lazy loaded. But when we are talking about the default here, we should maybe ask ourselves, okay, so what type of images are the most frequently used images in a typical website? Is it hero images or title area images, or just text flow images and sections which are below default, let's say?
I'm not sure I understood what was the concern with the below default.
Well, I mean, I think I am fine with the lazy being the default, because I feel like most of my websites have more images that should be lazy loaded and images that shouldn't be lazy loaded. But that's just my opinion, I guess. I think I would vote for lazy by default in Drupal, not in the spec, obviously. So this patch or this issue, what it's doing is giving the option, right? Not setting the lazy load
by default, or is it? I'm not clear. I'm not sure about that.
And in the chat, Lucas reminds us that Drupal 9.2 introduced the default of lazy loading. And yes, that's the default in Drupal, overriding the browser default. And he also points out that reversing that decision would be a BC break. So that's really out of scope for this issue. So this issue is about,
that's the case.
about introducing the option to override the default for some issues. And Aaron, you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Benji. And thanks, Ralph, for presenting it, and for Lucas for jumping into the chat. So I'd like to focus on the form here, because I think, so this is one of those forms where we're presenting a lot of text and two options. And I think actually radio buttons might be a better way to present this, because then you could put a description of lazy and a description of eager under each. Each radio button could have a separate description which explains why you would use this and what situations you might use this in. And that might be an easier way to present information rather than a big section of description above the option and then a drop down with the two options. So I would be interested to see how we could rearrange it slightly so that there's radio buttons there. And I did like the suggestion, really, I can't remember if it was Ralph that said it, also adding those additional sort of common use cases of when you would use lazy, when you would use eager, because it might not be, this might not be something that site builders, for instance, if they're coming and configuring this, they might not really understand what this does. So they might have to click out to another site or read up on it. And we can't really guarantee the quality of the information that they're going to get on third-party sites. So I think providing those examples in line, just a couple of examples, might be really useful to help set the context there.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of agreement in chat. Lucas agrees that the description is already too long, and Andre, Christina, Antonia, and Ralph are all giving +1s, and Marina +1. Okay, so I think we have strong consensus there that switching to radio buttons is a good idea.
I guess, is on the similar way of like, when, as far as I understand, when we're using lazy loading, it will always be great, meaning if the image is right there, it would load right away. The browser understands that if it's not in the viewport, it wouldn't. It seems like there's so much explanation of something that rarely someone probably should even change it. I don't understand what would be the case where finally browsers allow for this performance improvement. I don't know when would be the rare case that you actually don't want it to lazy load.
I think Lighthouse spits out a warning if you lazy load images above the default. So maybe
Hero image, for
Google is one
example.
of the reasons. Yes.
Okay, I'll look into that again, because again, from the browser point of view, yeah, lazy means if it needs to be loaded, it's loaded right away. Yeah, I'll check.
Lucas is giving us a link in the chat. Ralph, could you open that for us? And the problem is when it's above the fold, when it's in the initial viewport. And I guess, Offer, are you saying the browsers are smart enough that even if you specify lazy loading, it will load it immediately if it's in the initial viewport?
Yeah, so I did read, like, I need to read again, like some LCP articles that are specific about really trying to create, but the point of lazy loading is, instead of fancy JavaScript we had to use in the past, browser know exactly what you're looking at and what you don't, and before you even scroll to something, it will be loaded and will be ready. But if it's there, it should load right away. But I want to read more and see in the LCP, which is like this, right? A measurement that just check how can you do as fast as possible things to appear right there, maybe it does affect it somehow.
And what Lucas is saying in the chat is that lazy will load immediately above the fold. So what you are saying, Offer, but it still causes suffering LCP score. So it lowers the, what is LCP? Is that
Largest content something?
so wait,
Largest
our
contentful paint. So
largest contentful paint. Thank you. So are we saying that we're offering this option just to improve automated test scores rather than because it makes a real difference to the users?
yes. And so the only reason it would be that why would you ever not do that is that thing. And maybe then we need to look at it even differently because it's only above the fold. All the rest you would always, right, especially in mobile, you can defer from not loading images that are not needed, but then the user would need to define what's considered above the fold and things like that. So as far as I understand, it is always recommended lazy load for specifically LCP scores, which might change. It's Google this year and all that. There might be a small hit on the scoring there.
And Lucas's comment is lazy versus eager is complicated. I intentionally want to suggest lazy load as default because there are so many head-scratching caveats. But in advanced cases, switching to eager is a nice feature.
Should that be like a module for eager users?
The eager module, get it if you're really eager to use it. I feel like it's okay to include it. I mean, there's a balance between I think it'd be just an unnecessary amount of work to make a module just for this. Like we're already, we already have the choice there in Corso. I just wonder, like, I think it's useful to have it, but as Lucas said, like, we want to emphasize, and we can use descriptive text and other things to emphasize that this is like using lazy is the preferred option. And I feel like I'm not too familiar with LCP, even when the acronym was spelled out, it still wasn't clear what it was. But I feel like these kind of tests, and this is the case with accessibility stuff as well, these things evolve over time. So it might be the case that in a couple of years, that's less of a concern because the native browser lazy loading has become better at anticipating certain things. So I'm always also really wary of just doing something to pass a checkbox when it, pass a tick box exercise when it doesn't actually provide either doesn't provide a benefit to the user or makes their life worse. And I've had to fight for that recently. So yeah, that's a sort of something that I'm mindful of as well.
Let me read some more comments from the Slack. Ralph says, how about keep lazy as the default? And if we go with the radio button, add the description to the eager button about the above the fold image use case as a description. Yeah, I think that's the direction we're going in. And probably we don't want to do the full wordsmithing as part of this meeting. And Lucas says the scenarios he's thinking about are where an agency gets involved and the SEO experts are telling them to switch from lazy to eager because of these LCP scores. Yeah, so again, I think it's out of scope for this discussion to say whether or not we want to change the default. We're not going to change the default. So this issue is adding the eager option, and we really just want to focus on making it easier for the administrator to decide, or the site builder to decide which of the two options to choose. Offer, you still have your hand up. Do you want to say something else, or is that just left over
Sorry,
from
that
earlier?
was from before. I'll take
Okay.
it down.
And Lucas also says, by putting the entire lazy loading into a details, I think he's talking about the screenshot we're looking at now, that is toggled closed at the bottom of the formatter, hides things. It should be out of the way. Yeah, and that's what we have. It's something that it should not be used too often, so it's a good thing that that you need to click on it, as Ralph just did, to see these confusing options, but the options are there if you need them.
Yeah, so it sounded like our main recommendation was really just to explore the use of radio buttons here to see if we can more effectively communicate the differences and why you would use one over the other.
So Lucas asks, is changing to radios all we need to do? Yeah, I think so. And then some wordsmithing on what the options should say underneath the radio buttons. Lucas asks, anything with the book/description? Not sure. Was that a joke? The really long paragraph at the beginning of the details. Oh, that's what you're referring to as a book. Yeah, it's already kind of long, and that should probably be shortened as you change from the select list to radios. Ralph just said pretty much the same thing in the chat.
Yeah, and the way I was envisioning that was, yeah, because you can add a description to each radio button, that would allow us to shorten the top, but also like provide more contextual information in the right place.
Yeah, I think we're all agreed on that. Maybe we didn't say it explicitly until now. But yes, part of replacing the select list with radio buttons is that you then have the option, as Aaron said at the start, you then have the option to put a description on each radio button. And when you do that, you can naturally shorten that long block of text at the top. I think we're sort of done here. Any other things people want to say about this issue? Lucas, are you happy? Can you post a comment on the issue summarizing what we talked about? And Lucas apologizes for not joining with audio. We understand, you're not the only one. Ralph says in the chat, it's a great feature, and he thanks you for the work on it. Lucas says he'll summarize. Great. Okay, so we only have 10 minutes left. Is there something else we'd like to bring up in that 10 minutes? Or shall we just cut the meeting short?
Maybe it would be nice to talk about the BOF preparations for DrupalCon.
Oh yeah, that would be a good thing to talk about. So Christina, what's the current status? Has it been scheduled?
Nope, I was waiting to discuss with you, see who was going to be in there and help organizing it, or if we should break it into two BOFs, one for what should be there and the other about the technical implementation, for example. And yeah, I'm not sure if we should actually create another one for the menu, or we should just leave it in there. Sorry, the context is the editor menu, specific menu for content editors, or a menu specific for roles, or special navigation that it's not the site builder navigation. So let's first one, who is going to be at DrupalCon that is around here, that is here today? Okay.
So I think I'll be at DrupalCon. I'm kind of frustrated that it's still not clear, but I need to work that out with my employer. And I'll certainly participate in the BOF if it does happen. And I guess if you want help arranging some slides or wordsmithing the description beforehand, I'll help with that as well.
Okay, then seeing that there's going to be that many people that has participated in the discussions both here and in Slack, that is not going to be there. Probably a lot of work should be arranged, not on the WOF. Even that happens, we should probably try to spin the conversation or move the conversation in Slack first to be sure that everybody that wants to participate is able to do so. And maybe what I'm gonna do is just submit a general dashboard, but more focus on the implementation side, because not sure if you all have followed the conversation on the UX channel about the dashboard, which is trying to do some research before with users to know what should be in there, and not tying the technical implementation of what the dashboard should be, like if a views or just a page or whatever is the technical implementation to what needs to be in there. So yeah, okay, I'm just gonna continue this conversation on the UX channel maybe.
Okay. I wonder if there's a way we could sort of sneak people in via Zoom to a BOF. And I think it might not work very well. Like I could sit there and have a Zoom session open, and maybe they could hear the audio. It would be kind of hard to share.
Yeah, my concern. Yeah, my main concern with that is the audio, basically, because the last DrupalCon, the VOFs were just a table in a corner in the main lunch area, meaning that it wasn't like a silent or quiet place.
And Lucas says in the chat that he's tried this and it hasn't worked very well. I never hear anyone at DrupalCon, he says.
Yeah, it's not that I don't want, it's just that I'm concerned about being actually useful.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just figure out on Slack.
Okay.
Thanks.
So one or possibly two BOFs for the dashboard idea and content editor menu. Anything else before we drop off?
I guess about listening sessions, we could make it next week. And I am halfway through a draft for questions for the informal interviews, as well as a really, really rough scope for the listening sessions. I could refine it until next week, and then we could discuss it. And
yeah,
we would have something to move on, and also would be in time, especially the informal guerrilla interview questions would be suitable also for DrupalCon. You could ask at a DrupalCon several people there, as well as, like Aaron suggested, at his university. Here's a group of people you could ask and so forth. So we would have already or maybe even before DrupalCon, if you could ask the first few people, or everyone of our group here could ask a few, and then would be a good foundation for the BOF to have preliminary data already, maybe.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I'm wondering if would it work in a sort of form survey kind of format. So it could be just thinking if I send it out, if I were to send it out to a large internal group of content editors, content designers, that might be the most efficient way to get input would be through like an online form. So do you think the questions would, like if you were doing a more general questions, would those work in that format?
I think that's something that we should discuss next week when we when we talk about this in more detail.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just one brief note about Aaron's question. I think it would work to get a broader variety of answers, but it is, I would still recommend ask a few in person for 5 minutes only to get answers, to get an idea if you have as more or less an interview for if those persons are suitable for listening sessions, because you need someone who talks on his or her own with not giving yes or no answers and brief answers, but is gloomy and imaginary with the answers. So if you find someone who is open to talk, that is a good way to get an idea about the kind of answers you get from that person.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
But yeah, next week we will talk about it in more depth.
Okay, so thank you all for participating. It's been a great session, and we will continue with this time slot, and going forward, we'll make it this time slot from 1400 to 1500 UTC. We'll update the calendars and the issues for the meeting. So see you next week. Hope you can make it then.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, have a
Bye.
good weekend.
Likewise.